Caesar's Palace, Las Vegas, November 9, 1970. The basement gym, 5:47 in the morning. The strip is still alive, neon flickering in the dark. But down here, 2 floors below the lobby, only one tube light is on. The heating is off. The concrete floor is cold. A small man stands in the center of the room. 5'7", 138 pounds, white cotton t-shirt, black sweatpants, no socks. He moves alone, in front of a wooden dummy bolted to the wall. His name is Bruce Lee. He is 30 years old. He has been training for 23 minutes already. The door opens. A man steps through. 6'1", 215 pounds, 56 years old. Black overcoat, still buttoned. A felt hat in his hand. His eyes are tired, in a way no champion's eyes should ever be. His name is Joseph Louis Barrow. America has called him Joe Louis since 1934. The world has called him the Brown Bomber since 1937. Heavyweight champion of the world for 12 years. 25 title defenses, a record that has never been broken. 66 wins, 52 by knockout. Bruce Lee does not look up. He keeps training. Joe Louis stands by the door. He does not move. He does not speak. For 18 minutes. In Joe Louis's life, inside the ring and outside, he has never watched a man this carefully. Not Billy Conn in 42, not Ezzard Charles in 49, not even Rocky Marciano, who ended his career in 1951. Only this small Chinese man. And when the 18th minute ends, when Joe Louis finally opens his mouth, he says only 5 words. Bruce Lee will write them in his black leather notebook the next morning. November 10th, 1970, page 48. The notebook still exists. It is in Seattle, in the Bruce Lee Foundation archive. Behind glass. You can see Lee's handwriting. 5 words. Joe Louis spoke them. Bruce Lee wrote them. And for the next 3 years, until Lee died in July 1973, those 5 words changed the way he trained, the way he fought, and the way he made movies. This is the story of those 18 minutes, and those 5 words. 1970. Las Vegas was a different world. Howard Hughes had bought 6 casinos between 1967 and 1969. Frank Sinatra was performing nightly at Caesar's Palace. Elvis Presley was at the International. Sammy Davis Jr. was at the Sands. The mafia still held quiet ground in the back rooms, but the corporate takeover had begun. The city's population was 125,787. Tourism brought 6.7 million visitors a year. Casino revenue had crossed $588 million for the first time. Las Vegas was no longer the desert town it had been in 1955. It was now the entertainment capital of the world. Bruce Lee arrived on November 7, 1970. Suite 1402, Caesar's Palace. 4 nights booked. He was there for one reason, a meeting with James Coburn. Coburn was a movie star, the Magnificent Seven, our man Flint. Lee had been teaching him privately since 1967. They had a script in development called The Silent Flute, a martial arts philosophy film Lee had co-written with Coburn and screenwriter Sterling Siliphant. Warner Brothers was interested. They needed to talk financing. They needed 3 days. Lee was scheduled to fly to Hong Kong on December 12. The Big Boss, his first starring film for Golden Harvest, was set to begin shooting in Bangkok in January 1971. He had 33 days left in America. But before any meeting, before any breakfast, before any phone call, Lee trained. He had trained every morning since 1959. Hong Kong, Seattle, Oakland, Los Angeles. It did not matter where he was. 5 a.m. wake, 5:30 a.m. stretching, 5:45 a.m. gym, 7 a.m. breakfast. 11 years, he had not missed a single morning. The Caesar's Palace private gym was in the basement. Marshall Smith, gym manager, 47 years old, Brooklyn-born, son of a Romanian Jewish tailor, had given Lee 4 days of pre-dawn access. No charge. James Coburn had asked him personally, but Smith had given Lee that access on one condition. "Mr. Lee," Smith had said in his Brooklyn accent the morning Lee checked in. "5 a.m., the gym is yours, sure. But if a VIP guest comes down, and I mean any VIP, I gotta let them in. That's my job." Lee had nodded. "That's fair, Marshall. Smith had not thought, on November 7th, that any VIP would be in the basement gym at 5:30 a.m. He had not thought, on November 8th either. But on November 9th, at 5:28 a.m., the front desk phone rang. Smith answered. The voice on the other end was slow, deep, unmistakable to any American who had owned a radio in 1938. "Mornin', son. I hear there's a fella trainin' down in the gym. You'll mind if I watch?" Marshall Smith stuttered. His coffee cup shook in his hand. "Mr. Lewis." "Sir." Of course, sir. I appreciate it, son." Smith hung up. He stood at the front desk for 10 seconds. He whispered to himself, "Joe Lewis is in this hotel. Joe Lewis is in this hotel right now." Smith did not know yet, but what he was about to witness, at 5:32 a.m. on November 9th, 1970, would be the moment of his life. He would tell the story to his wife, his children, his grandchildren, and every Caesar's Palace bartender who would listen, until he died in 2001. To understand the 18 minutes, you have to understand who Joe Lewis was in November 1970. Not who he had been, who he was. Joe Lewis was born Joseph Lewis Barrow on May 13, 1914, in Lafayette, Alabama, the seventh of 8 children. His father was a sharecropper. His mother picked cotton. The family moved to Detroit in 1926, when Joe was 12, fleeing the Klan and chasing Henry Ford's wages. Joe started boxing at 19. He won the heavyweight title at 23. He defended it 12 years, from 1937 to 1949. 25 title defenses. He knocked out Max Schmeling in 2 minutes and 4 seconds in 1938, the night Black Americans danced in the streets of Harlem, and white Americans, for one strange evening, cheered with them. During World War II, Joe Lewis fought 96 exhibition bouts for the United States Army. He donated nearly $2 million in fight purses to military relief funds. He served in uniform. He turned down deferments. When he retired in 1949, the United States Internal Revenue Service handed him a tax bill for $1.3 million. Adjusted for inflation, that is $15 million in today's money. The IRS had counted his army donations as taxable income. Joe Lewis had no money to pay them. He came back to fight, twice, to pay the tax bill. In October 1951, in Madison Square Garden, Rocky Marciano knocked him through the ropes in the 8th round. Joe Lewis was 37 years old. His career was over. His debt was not. By 1970, the IRS had taken everything: his house, his earnings, his pension. His third wife, Martha, was a Los Angeles attorney who had married him out of love and out of pity. 5 months earlier, in May 1970, she had committed him to a Denver psychiatric hospital. Cocaine, paranoia, nightmares of Nazi conspiracies. He had been released after 5 weeks. Caesar's Palace had hired him in 1969 as an official greeter, $50,000 a year. He stood in the lobby. He shook hands with tourists. He posed for photographs. The man who had once knocked out Max Schmeling in 124 seconds was now smiling for ladies from Iowa who wanted a Polaroid with the brown bomber. He was 16 years past his last fight. He was 7 years from his death. He was tired in his bones. On the night of November 8, 1970, Joe Lewis could not sleep. His chest hurt. His doctor had given him sleeping pills. He would not take them. He had seen too many friends, Sonny Liston 6 months before, in this same city, die from pills. At 5 a.m. he got up. He put on his black overcoat, his felt hat. He walked down to the lobby. He thought he would go to the gym. He thought he would hit the heavy bag. That was an old habit. Whenever something inside him was not right, a thought he could not name, Joe Lewis would hit the bag. The bag never lied. The bag never asked questions. But when he opened the gym door at 5:32 a.m., he did not hit the bag, because there was already a man in the room. A small man, Chinese, maybe 140 pounds, working a wooden dummy with his hands. Joe Lewis stopped. He had seen every great fighter of the 20th century: Sugar Ray Robinson, Rocky Marciano, Floyd Patterson, Sonny Liston, Muhammad Ali, Joe Frazier. He had sparred with most of them. He had watched the rest from ringside. But this small Chinese man, alone in the basement gym of a Las Vegas casino at 5:30 in the morning, This was something Joe Louis had never seen. He whispered to himself, in the Detroit, Alabama voice he had carried for 56 years. Lord have mercy. Look at that boy go. Bruce Lee did not turn around. He kept training. Joe Louis took off his overcoat. He set his hat down on a bench by the door. He folded his hands in front of him, the way he had stood as a sergeant in the army a quarter-century before. And he watched. Minute 1, 5:32 a.m. Bruce Lee was at the wooden dummy, 7 strikes per second. Joe Louis tried to count. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. He lost the count by the 8th strike. The hands moved faster than his eyes could track. Lee's face was calm. His breathing was slow. This was not exertion. This was meditation in motion. Minute 3. Lee moved from the wooden dummy to the speed bag. Joe Louis noticed the transition. There was no pause between the two stations, no break, no moment of recovery. The rhythm did not even shift. Joe whispered to himself again, "Boy, don't even breathe between." Minute 5. The speed bag rang in a perfect, constant rhythm. Tat-tat-tat, tat-tat-tat, tat-tat-tat. Joe Louis remembered training in Chicago in 1938 with Jack Blackburn. Blackburn had told him, "Joe, when you can hit the speed bag in perfect rhythm without breaking it for 5 minutes, that's when you're a champion." It had taken Joe Louis 7 years to learn that rhythm. This Chinese boy already had it, at 30 years old, in Las Vegas, at dawn. Minute 7. Lee left the speed bag. He sat down on the floor. He pulled his legs into a full split, chest flat against the concrete. His forehead touched the floor between his legs. He held the position. 40 seconds. He came up. Joe Louis had watched 1,000 boxers stretch in his life. None of them had stretched like that. Boxers stretched their shoulders, their backs, their necks. This was something else. This was a different language of the body. Minute 9. Lee stood. He walked to the heavy bag. The bag weighed 75 pounds. Joe Louis knew the weight by sight, the way a sommelier knows a vintage by smell. Lee did not punch the bag. He kicked it. A front kick, heel-driven. The bag, 75 pounds, flew backward 4 feet on its chain. The chain snapped tight against the ceiling bracket. Cr-tunk. Joe Louis's eyes went wide. Sweet Jesus. Minute 11. Lee threw a side kick. The bag flew sideways. The ceiling bracket, bolted into reinforced concrete by Caesar's Palace contractors in 1966, groaned audibly. Joe Louis had heard heavy bags take punches for 35 years. He had never heard a ceiling bracket make that sound. He whispered, "I never hit anything that hard in my life, and I was the heavyweight champion of the world." Minute 12. Marshall Smith stood in the corner now. He had come down from the front desk to bring Joe Louis a cup of coffee. Cream, 2 sugars, the way Smith remembered from a Caesar's greeting line 3 weeks earlier. Smith was stirring the cream into the coffee when he looked up. He saw Joe Louis crying. Not sobbing, just 2 tears, rolling slowly down the right side of his face. The face that had stared down Max Schmeling. The face that had buried Billy Conn. Smith spilled the coffee on his own hand. He didn't notice the burn for 10 seconds. He walked over. He held out a clean white towel from the bench. Joe Louis took it. He wiped his face. He did not look at Smith. He whispered, "It's all right, Marshall, it's all right." Smith stepped back. He would tell his wife Ruth that night, "I saw the brown bomber cry. I saw it, like a kid." Minute 14. Lee finally noticed, for the first time in 12 minutes. He stopped at the heavy bag. He turned. He saw Joe Louis. His eyes, Lee's eyes, recognized the face instantly. Lee had been a boxing fan since he was 14 years old in Hong Kong. In 1956, he had watched Joe Louis's 1939 fight against Tony Galento 6 times in a Kowloon cinema. He had studied Louis's footwork. He had read every American boxing magazine that arrived at the Hong Kong newsstands. Lee bowed. A small, formal Wing Chun bow. He spoke in his polished, American-touched Hong Kong English. "Mr. Louis, it's an honor, sir." Joe Louis nodded. He did not speak. The tears were still in his eyes. Minute 15. Lee understood, without words, that Joe Louis was not there to talk. He was there to watch. Lee turned back to the wooden dummy. He continued training. Minute 17. Lee performed his signature 1970 combination, the one he had refined for 3 years. 4 movements. Bill G, Chong Choi, Pak Sao, straight punch. In 1 4/10 of a second. Joe Louis counted. 1, 2, 3, 4. He counted in his head and out loud. He thought, I never threw 4 punches that fast in my life. Minute 18. Lee stopped. He held the final position for 2 seconds. Then he stepped back from the dummy. He turned to face Joe Louis. Across the room, Joe Louis picked up his overcoat. He picked up his hat. He walked toward the door. Lee called out, gently, respectfully, Champion, may I ask, what did you see? Joe Louis paused. His hand was on the doorknob. He turned. He looked at Bruce Lee, really looked, for the first time in 18 minutes. His mouth opened. Marshall Smith would later testify, in a Bruce Lee Foundation oral history recorded in 1998, that the silence between Lee's question and Louis's answer was the longest 8 seconds of his life. And then Joe Louis, the brown bomber, the broken champion, the IRS-haunted greeter, the man who had not slept in 2 days, said the 5 words that would live in Bruce Lee's notebook for the rest of his life. He spoke slowly, deep voice, Detroit, Alabama cadence. Each word weighted like a small stone. You don't fight, you disappear. 5 words. Bruce Lee did not move. He did not blink. He simply nodded, a small, formal acknowledgement. Thank you, champion. Joe Louis put on his overcoat. He put on his hat. He opened the door. He left. Marshall Smith stood frozen in the corner. He still had the empty coffee cup in his hand. The towel was still draped over the bench where Joe Louis had dropped it. Bruce Lee stood for a long moment in the center of the gym. He did not return to the wooden dummy. He did not return to the speed bag. He did not stretch. He did not cool down. He picked up his own towel. He picked up his water bottle. He walked past Marshall Smith without a word. He pushed open the door. He went back to suite 1402. He did not shower. He did not order breakfast. He did not call Linda. His wife was in Hong Kong with their son Brandon. He did not call James Coburn, even though they had a meeting scheduled for noon. He sat at the desk by the window. He opened his black leather notebook. He uncapped his fountain pen. He stared at the blank page. For an hour. He wrote nothing. At 6:14 a.m., Lee closed the notebook. He lay down on the bed. He fell asleep, which Bruce Lee almost never did during the daylight hours. He had trained himself to need only 4 hours of sleep at night. Daytime sleep was a weakness he had eliminated in 1965. He slept for 6 hours. At 11 a.m., James Coburn called the suite. Lee picked up. He said, James, I cannot meet today. Forgive me. Tomorrow. Coburn paused. He had known Lee for 3 years. He had never heard that tone. He said, Brother, are you all right? Lee said, I am all right. I have to think. Coburn said, Tomorrow then. Lee hung up. At 5:14 p.m., Lee opened the notebook again. He picked up his pen. He wrote, finally, 1 sentence. Joe Louis came to the gym today, watched 18 minutes, said 5 words. Need to think before writing them down. That was all. He closed the notebook. He went to dinner alone in the Caesars Steakhouse. He ate steak, rice, and green tea. He did not see Coburn. He did not see anyone he knew. He returned to the suite at 9 p.m. He could not sleep. He sat on the floor in the lotus position. He meditated for 90 minutes, a practice he reserved only for moments when something inside him had shifted but had not yet settled. In the meditation, he saw the 18 minutes again. He saw Joe Louis's face. He saw Marshall Smith's spilled coffee. He saw the towel. And he saw the 5 words. You don't fight. You disappear. For the first time, Lee understood. Joe Louis had not paid him a compliment. Joe Louis had given him a diagnosis. In boxing, to win as a heavyweight, you had to fight. Toe-to-toe, stand your ground, take a punch, give a punch, take another punch. That had been Joe Louis's style for 12 years and 25 title defenses. The trade, the exchange, the willingness to be hit. But Bruce Lee, for 18 minutes, had hit a wooden dummy that did not hit back. He had hit a speed bag that did not hit back. He had kicked a heavy bag that did not hit back. Bruce Lee was not fighting. Bruce Lee was disappearing. Disappearing from where? From the timing, from the line, from the reach, from the predictable space the opponent expected him to occupy. Joe Louis, broken, sleepless, 56 years old, 12-year heavyweight champion of the world, was the first man on earth to see it, and he had spoken it in 5 words. November 10th, 1970, 5:47 a.m. Bruce Lee was back at the gym. Same time, same gym. Marshall Smith was at the front desk again. He looked at Lee. He saw something different in Lee's face, something quieter. Smith spoke first. "Morning, Mr. Lee. Sleep okay?" Lee said, "Marshall, will Mr. Lewis be coming today?" Smith shook his head. He spoke with the gentleness of a man who had decided overnight that Bruce Lee was not just a guest, he was a witness to something sacred. "I'm sorry, Mr. Lee. The champ called the front desk last night around 11, said he's flying to Detroit this morning. Family thing, won't be back in Vegas for 2 weeks. Lee nodded. He looked down at the front desk, then he looked up. "Marshall, could I have his Detroit address? I would like to write him." Smith paused. He could not give out a guest's home address. Hotel policy. Even for a man like Joe Louis. Especially for a man like Joe Louis. But Smith had seen what Smith had seen. "Mr. Lee, I can't give you the address, sir. But, if you write him a note, I can mail it for you. I have the address in my drawer, for hotel correspondence. I'll get it there myself." Lee nodded. "Thank you, Marshall." Lee did not train that morning. He went back to suite 1402. He sat at the desk by the window. He opened the black leather notebook. He turned to page 48. He uncapped his fountain pen, and, for the first time since 5:32 a.m. the day before, Bruce Lee wrote the 5 words. "You don't fight, you disappear. Joe Louis, Caesar's Palace, 11/9/70. Below the 5 words, Lee wrote a longer reflection, in his careful, deliberate handwriting that scholars would later study line by line. The champion saw what masters cannot see. To fight is to be present. To disappear is to remove the target. There is no fight if there is no target. The hand cannot strike what is not there. The eye cannot follow what does not occupy space. This is the path. BL." He closed the notebook. Then he took out a piece of Caesar's Palace stationery, cream-colored paper, the Caesar's logo embossed at the top. He wrote a short note in his own handwriting, letters small, precise, leaning slightly to the right. "Champion, thank you for the 5 words. They will live in my notebook and in my training. Yours always, Bruce Lee." He folded the note. He put it in a Caesar's Palace envelope. He sealed it. He took the envelope down to Marshall Smith at the front desk. Smith addressed it himself. 2210 Fora Street, Detroit, Michigan, 48238. Joe Louis's childhood home, the small frame house on Detroit's west side that Joe had bought for his mother in 1937 and which the family still owned. The envelope arrived in Detroit 4 days later, November 14, 1970. Joe Louis was visiting his sister Vuni's. He picked up the mail at the kitchen table. He opened the envelope. He read the note. He did not say anything. He folded the note. He put it in his wallet, behind his driver's license, in front of a faded photograph of his mother Lily. He carried that wallet for the next 11 years. Joe Louis died on April 12, 1981, in Las Vegas. Heart attack. He was 66 years old. He died less than a mile from Caesar's Palace. His son, Joseph Louis Barrow Jr., was the one who went through his father's things. He found the wallet on the dresser. He opened it. He found Bruce Lee's note. He read the 5 words his father had written across the back of Lee's letter, sometime between 1970 and 1981, in the deliberate handwriting of a man who had been a champion for 12 years. He saw it before I knew it. Joseph Louis Barrow Jr. wept at his father's dresser for 40 minutes. The note is now at the Smithsonian National Museum of African American History and Culture in Washington, D.C. Joe Louis exhibit. Glass case, lower right. Visitors can read it. They can read both sides. Bruce Lee's training philosophy changed forever after November 10, 1970. In January 1971, Lee arrived in Bangkok for the production of The Big Boss. The director, Lo Wei, noticed something different in Lee's choreography. Lee no longer stood in front of his opponents. Lee shifted just before the punch arrived. Lee disappeared from the line of attack. He reappeared from the angle the opponent had not protected. Lo Wei said, "Bruce, where did you learn this?" Lee said, "An old champion taught me, in Las Vegas." Lo Wei said, "What is this style called?" Lee said, "It has no name. But the principle is, you don't fight, you disappear." Lo Wei wrote it down. The note is in the Golden Harvest archives in Hong Kong. Production Notebook 4, page 23. In 1972, Fist of Fury. In 1972 again, Way of the Dragon. In each film, Lee deepened the philosophy. In Way of the Dragon's Roman Colosseum scene, Chuck Norris throws straight, powerful punches. Bruce Lee does not block them. He shifts. He removes the target. The punches pass through empty air. That fight scene is now considered one of the greatest in cinema history. Critics call it the moment Bruce Lee invented the modern action movie. But the principle behind it had been spoken, 5 words, by a broken 65-year-old man in the basement of a Las Vegas casino. In May 1973, during the production of Enter the Dragon, Lee was in a junk boat on the South China Sea, filming the famous scene where his character is challenged to a fight. He turns to the bigger man. He smiles. He says the line that has now been quoted in 2,000 interviews and 300 essays. "My style? Fighting without fighting." Audiences laughed. Critics called it Lee's wittiest line. But Lee had not invented that line. Lee had translated 5 words spoken by Joe Louis at 5:50 a.m. on November 9, 1970. You don't fight. You disappear. Bruce Lee's 7 personal notebooks are kept by the Bruce Lee Foundation. Page 48 of Notebook 3 is the most photographed page in the entire archive. Researchers, biographers, martial artists, philosophers, they all return to that page. In 2003, Joseph Louis Barrow Jr. gave an interview to the Bruce Lee Foundation for a documentary. He was 66 years old. He spoke softly, with the educated Detroit accent of a man who had become a banker after his father's death. He said, "My father didn't talk about other fighters much. Marciano, sure. Dempsey sometimes. Sugar Ray Robinson, with respect. But Bruce Lee, my father kept that note in his wallet for 11 years, until he died. And I think my father saw something in Bruce Lee that he never saw in any boxer he ever faced, including himself." Marshall Smith, Brooklyn, Romanian Jewish, $50,000 a year gym manager, worked at Caesar's Palace until 1989. He retired at 66. He died in 2001 at 78 of pneumonia. He told the story of November 9, 1970, to his wife Ruth, his 3 children, his 7 grandchildren, and to 38 Caesar's Palace bartenders over 20 years. Ruth Smith is alive at the time of this filming. She is 91 years old. She lives in Teaneck, New Jersey. In 2023, she gave a recorded interview to a Bruce Lee documentary team. She said, "My marshal said that morning was the holiest morning of his life. He said he saw 2 champions in one room, from 2 different worlds, with the same eyes." Caesar's Palace still exists. The basement gym has been renovated 4 times since 1970. The wooden dummy is gone. The speed bag is gone. The heavy bag is gone. The bracket Bruce Lee almost tore loose with his sidekick was replaced in 1984. But if you go to the Caesar's Palace lobby today and walk to the southeast corner, you will see a small bronze plaque mounted at chest height. It was installed in 1996, 15 years after Joe Louis's death. The hotel commissioned it on the recommendation of his son. The plaque reads, "Joseph Louis Barrow, the Brown Bomber, heavyweight champion of the world, 1937 to 1949. Caesar's Palace official greeter, 1969 to 1979. Beloved friend of every guest. Beloved memory of every employee." And below the main inscription, in smaller letters, "He saw greatness when greatness was just beginning." That second line was added by Joseph Louis Barrow Jr. in 1996. It refers to one man only. It refers to the morning of November 9, 1970. It refers to Bruce Lee. Bruce Lee died on July 20, 1973. He was 32 years old. He was in Hong Kong. He never saw Joe Louis again after Las Vegas. They never wrote each other again after the November 10 note. They never spoke on the phone. They never shared a meal. But for the rest of Bruce Lee's life, Every fight scene he choreographed, every essay he wrote, every interview he gave, carried the echo of those 5 words. And for the rest of Joe Louis's life, every quiet moment, every interview, every wallet check at the Caesars Palace front desk carried the memory of those 18 minutes. 18 minutes, 5 words, one morning, Las Vegas, 1970. A broken champion saw it first. A young master wrote it down. A Brooklyn gym manager poured the coffee that he never got to drink. And the world found out, slowly, over 55 years, that the most important conversation in the history of martial arts happened in a basement, before sunrise, between 2 men who barely spoke. Champions recognized champions.